Well, hiya, BookTube. Bill Ruttenberg here with the Ruttenberg Library. I wanted to come to you today with a weekly reads. I hadn't done one of these in a couple weeks, and so I thought maybe it was time. I've been digging into some good stuff in my reading. A couple of these are pretty big books, so it's taken a little bit of time to get through them, but that's all right. That's the way it goes. I did get a book finished this week, and then I got a couple of books that I had a colleague give to me, and I'm very glad to add them into the library. So I kind of wanted to share all that stuff with you and get this video done while I have time. So just tell you a little bit about life also. This last week we started our second semester of school, and we got everything off, started off on a good foot, and we're looking at the Renaissance in my high school class. And so the kids went and they did a little bit of research on a individual Renaissance artist. And so we've been partaking in presentations. I started them Friday, and they'll carry into this week, into today, and very excited to see what they found. I got one student who she does such an outstanding job in all of her presentations. We did one in first semester, you ask for a 20-minute presentation and she gives you 40, and she just does an awesome job. And she's become a very good leader for the other kids to follow, and I don't want to say totally mimic, but mimic the work ethic. And so that's been really nice to see. She was presenting last week, didn't quite get done because she ran out of time, and she'll finish up today, but she did a really good job, and so did my other student that went, and they've been covering the Ninja Turtles, Michelangelo and Leonardo, Donatello and Raphael. Those were 4 of them that are going to get covered here. 2 of them got covered last week, and then we'll get the other 2, and then there's some other ones, Botticelli and some other artists that they're going to cover. And so it's been a lot of fun watching that and listening in on what the kids learned, and then just seeing the progression for the artists from the past to the Renaissance. That was one thing we were looking at in class that was really neat. My 8th graders were going over the Declaration of Independence, and we were looking at different viewpoints on the Declaration by current historians, and was that an ideological revolution, or was that a selfish revolution? Was it for everybody, and everybody to get equality and all of that kind of, and the freedoms? Excuse me, or was it just so that the rich could retain power and stay rich? So that was a pretty interesting take on the Declaration. The kids always love the DBQs. My 7th grade was hitting D-Day, and we were watching a Discovery video on some of the science behind D-Day, and they really enjoy that video. They always do. And then we're going to do later this week, we'll do a DBQ over the atomic bomb, because we're starting to wrap the war up. We're doing all the final movements of the war, and we'll do a DBQ over the decision-making of whether we should have or should not have used the bomb, based on the advice that was given to Harry Truman and all of the public sentiment at the time of the bomb. My 6th graders are starting research projects. They are researching civil rights movements within the United States, and that's not just the one for African Americans. It's also including Native Americans, women's rights, Asian Americans, Latinos. It's including all of the movements that have happened in the last 100 years or so. And of course, some of those go back into the 1800s, and so the kids are doing some research on that, and they're enjoying that so far. We haven't got real far in it. We've been doing a lot of prep work on, just as a historian, how do we look at sources? How do we, when we pick up a source, how do we read that? What things do we want to think about? What should become automatic as we do research? And so we did a lot of that last week. So we didn't get real in depth at looking at resources just yet, or going out and finding them. But anyway, so the classroom's been an adventure. We're having fun with stuff so far. This second semester, we I got to also go to Cedar Rapids and got to get involved in a coaching clinic for baseball, and that was good. We got to listen to some really good speakers and, just get some ideas that are, I don't know if it's brand new information, but maybe a new way of presenting the information just on, fielding on the infield, fielding ground balls, pitching, looking at release points and stuff like that, and some technical stuff and some simple stuff, and then just the idea, the philosophies of coaching of what do you got to have that good relationship with your players and stuff like that. So it was a good clinic. It was a very, very long day. I had to we went and got the school van, and we left at like 5 a.m. And we actually had to leave the clinic a little early because my other coach that I work with, he coaches the varsity basketball. So we had to leave around 4 o'clock so that he could get to one of the other schools around. They were playing Southeast Warren, and so we had to leave at 4 to get him there in time to go coach that game, and then I just came on home from there. So basically, long story short, I left at 5 a.m. and didn't get home till around 8 p.m. And by the time you're so tired, and then you sit down and eat and take a shower and just kind of dead to the world. So that led into yesterday. Of course, we had some NFL playoff games. Oh my gosh, were those so exciting. Everything came down to the wire, and of course my Kansas City Chiefs, they about gave me a heart attack yesterday. I am not kidding. The last 2 minutes of the game, my chest hurt. And I know I shouldn't be like that, but the lead changes. I think they had 3 different lead changes within the last 2 minutes, and then of course the overtime on top of that. And it was a really good game both ways. Both teams played really well. It was amazing. Mahomes threw, I think they said, for 173 yards in the final 2 minutes. That's not like a game stat. That's the final 2 minutes. And like I said, both quarterbacks played really, really well. Josh Allen for Buffalo did very, very well. And it was kind of cool seeing Buffalo in there because their right tackle is a local boy, not from our town, but from the neighboring town. And so we played him in sports and everything, and played him, football, basketball, baseball. And so their right tackle had we had a little connection with that, and so that's kind of neat. I know there was a lot of Christmas presents distributed this year with his jersey. Had brown on the back, and so that was really neat because he's a really good guy and pretty neat character. He's got a big personality, and he's funny, and so anyway, that was always that kind of stuff's always kind of cool. So all right, so let's get to the books because that's really why you're here. Sorry, I'm rambling along, but anyway, the book that I got finished this weekend, I've been kind of just picking at it as I go to bed. I'll read a chapter or two, and it had 28 chapters in it, but they were like 5, 6, 7 pages, and then you're done with the chapter. So the whole book was only 191 pages, and this was another James Bond thriller. This is Ian Fleming's From Russia with Love, and this last year, if you follow the channel, I was first introduced to Ian Fleming and the James Bond novels. I thought it would be neat to try. I found them for dirt cheap at the Jesse James Outlet Mall, and so I picked up a handful, 4, 5, 6 of them, and so this is my second one. I'm definitely going to come back to them because they're nice. They're nice books to read right before bed. The chapters are about the right length for reading right before bed. So it took me way longer than it should have. You can read this in an afternoon or two, but I chose to read it a little bit at a time. But this was really good. It's all about there is a Russian spy who is being brought in to kill James Bond, and they're going to use a little bit different technique to get him. They're going to, use his, everybody's got strengths and weaknesses, so they're going to use his weaknesses against him, and they send in this absolutely stunningly beautiful girl to seduce him and she got in his bed and got his mind going somewhere else, and tricked him into taking her to London, or that's what she thinks, or that's what he thinks they're doing. And along the way on the train ride, they're supposed to get the code breaker machine, and they're taking it to London, and she's being used as a pawn in the overall SMERSH. Isn't it SMERSH? Yeah, the SMERSH organization that Russia has. It's their spy network, basically. And she's being used as a pawn, and the actual killer's going to come in after she gets James Bond all set up, thinking one way, and then he kills him, or tries to kill him. Anyway, that's the name of the game here. So the setting of the book was kind of bounced around. It was a little bit in London, not for very long, with James Bond, and it did quite a bit in Moscow with the Soviet spies, but a lot of it took place in Turkey. And then the train ride, the train goes from Turkey through, let's see, was it Bulgaria, and then it gets over towards, I'm trying to remember all the countries it went through. It gets into Italy and Switzerland and eventually France. And so you get this train ride going across Europe. And but the bulk of the story took place in Turkey before the train actually left. The train ride's the very last part of the book, but you did get to thinking maybe they got James Bond. Of course, if you know the story, there's a bunch more books, so you know they don't get him. But it was a good book. I'd recommend it. It was a quick, fun read. I like the James Bond stuff. Here are 3 other books. I did not get these 3 finished, but I've been working on them during the month of January. First one is John Adams by John Patrick Diggins, and this comes from the American Presidents series done by Arthur Schlesinger Jr., and there's one for every president. And I bought the first 20 biographies of the presidents for my classroom, and so I've been trying to read them so that I can, whether I can give a good recommendation to the kids or not. I am, let's see, about 110 pages in, and it's a pretty short biography. It's only 176 pages, so I'm really close to the end. If I can, knock out a little bit here and a little bit there, I ought to be able to finish this pretty soon. This week it should be finished. It'll probably be my next target to get done. But it's been good. It has fast parts and it has slow parts. I have enjoyed the faster paced parts. The slower paced parts I have not so much. The slower paced parts were and maybe it's just because maybe it's my tastes and what I like to read. The author was talking about John Adams and when they went to create the nation and all of the philosophy behind the creation of the nation and the ideas of the Enlightenment thinkers and how it's applied, and then John Adams's writings. And I got to be honest, it kind of bored me just a little bit. But now that I've gotten out of that part and the country actually gets established, once he becomes vice president, that part of the book started to pick up pace, and then his presidency really picked up pace. And that's where I'm at right now. The next chapter deals with the Alien and Sedition Acts, and I have thoroughly enjoyed that part. That part has read pretty quick, and it's been pretty insightful. And so I definitely can recommend those parts of the book. So that's what I've been reading. And then the next book that I've been reading, and it's pretty chunky, is The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt by Edmund Morris. And of course, this is volume 1 of his trilogy. I had this on last year's TBR list and never got to it. So I put it on this year's TBR list, and it was the very first book that I picked up this month. And so I've been reading it since January 1st. When you get time to read it, it reads really fast. I can't speak enough about this book. If you have any interest in Theodore Roosevelt whatsoever, or in the time period of the second half of the 1800s, you need to pick this book up. It is really good. The narrative is very fast paced. It's very entertaining. Edmund Morris is just a heck of an author. It's too bad he couldn't have done more it's too bad he passed away, that he couldn't have done more with his work. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and this is going to be one of my top recommends for anybody looking for a good, thick biography. I'm on page 664, and let's see. Well, the book total is 920 pages, but the actual text, I believe, is 780. 780 pages of actual text, and then the rest of it's, footnotes and stuff. But I'm on page 664, so I'm about 3/4 of the way through it. I suspect if I was to get to reading on this, I could easily, I should have had it done this weekend, but I can probably have it done next weekend. For sure, I will have it done before the month is out. But it is very good. Excuse me. It is very good. It has, the part that I'm talking about now, or reading about now, is the Spanish-American War. And I just think Theodore Roosevelt is a thoroughly entertaining character to begin with. He did so much in his lifespan, and he was just such a extrovert, and just, he's got a heck of a personality. And and I understand not everybody appreciates him, but I appreciate him. He's one of my favorite people to read about, and there's just so much to read about. Because in this book it talked about his youth and his health issues when he was little with asthma and stuff like that, and how well traveled he was. And then it got into, of course, his work on the ranch and in the Dakotas, and then it got into his political climb up the political ladder for the state of New York, and now he's gotten on to national politics. And of course, he was the police commissioner for New York City, and that was thoroughly entertaining. I remember reading about that in H.W. Brands's biography on him, and I really liked that part of the book. And Morris did a really good job with that as well. But then he gets in and gets in as the assistant secretary to the Navy. And of course, he sets the United States up for victory during the Spanish-American War, building up the Navy, which had needed to be done because it was very, very out of date. But he got it built up right before then. And of course, he, a lot of people would consider him a warmonger, and he wanted to have a war just so he could have the chance to be a hero, really. And, you can definitely agree or disagree with that. That can be a like him or hate him type situation. But as far as reading goes, it's always entertaining to read about. It's pretty exciting. And Morris does an excellent job with this. Roosevelt and his men are about ready to land in the Caribbean. They're on the boats heading towards the Caribbean islands. So, I look forward to getting this all finished up. The other book that I started these last last Monday, I guess, is when I started this. The other book and I had this on my TBR for last year also and didn't get to it, and here it is again. So this will be book number 2 off my TBR. This is The Hemingses of Monticello, An American Family by Annette Gordon Reed. And I am buddy reading this with Vin at Revenant Reads and Patrice Jones. And I am thoroughly enjoying this book. Annette Gordon Reed she is a very good writer. If you have not checked out her stuff, you need to go check it out. I think you will be impressed with it. As Vin pointed out, she's got a little bit of a legal background. And so when she builds up an argument, she said, she gives her thesis and then just throws evidence upon evidence. And it's not that she piles you up with it, and she doesn't overdo it, but she puts it in there, explains it, puts it in there, explains it, and just builds up her ideas, and just does a wonderful job presenting them. I'm kind of rambling, but the chapters that we read this last weekend were over John Wales, and it gives a little bit of the history of his background. And then it was also talking about the status of slave children and the families themselves. When, who is your father? And of course, the differences between if you had two slaves who had children versus a slave and the plantation, the white plantation owner, and just the status of those children and how it's looked at, and how a child is looked at from the viewpoint of or the differences between a slave and the white master, and then just that plantation owner's family itself when he actually has a child with his wife. Just the different statuses in those children, and it was very, very interesting. And I think that was chapter 3. And I'm thoroughly enjoying this book. I would highly recommend anybody who wants to study history and slavery, like from a kind of a localized family point of view. If you're wanting to study the Hemmingses, of course, or Jefferson, or that relationship between the two, I highly recommend that book. I'm looking forward to seeing where she goes with her arguments. As you can see, I've already got it tabbed up quite a bit in the first chapter anyway, and I suspect that's going to happen throughout the book. It's been a really good read, and I really love listening to Patrice and Vin. They are very, very insightful into stuff. Patrice has we call her the wordsmith, and listening to her and her, talking about the vocabulary stuff, I've always enjoyed that, and just the viewpoint that she gives. And then Vin is giving a pretty thorough history lesson for the two of us, and I'm enjoying listening to him because it's like sitting in his classroom is kind of how I'm viewing it. So good stuff there. Now, last part of the video here, I wanted to show you some stuff that has come into the library in this last week or so, maybe week and a half. I got the new Smithsonian magazine in, headlined by The Oldest Tree, or Finding the Oldest Tree, the discovery of ancestral U.S. forests and their vital role in our future. That's a very timely article, so I look forward to that. It also has, let's see, up at the top, the amazing birds that migrate more than 16,000 miles a year, guarding ancient Iraqi treasure, bold medieval queens of Europe. I look forward to that article. I think that's going to be good. And then caring for homeless pets in LA. So it sounds like there's going to be some good stuff in this magazine. Got to get to it. I have a habit of I get some really good stuff in my magazines, and then I put them to the side because I'm in depth in my, up to my elbows in my books that I'm reading, and I forget to get back to my magazines. And there is just, if you're into a shorter read because you just don't have a ton of time, I'd recommend these magazines. These magazines, periodicals, whatever you want to call them. They're really good. Smithsonian is excellent. I would highly recommend that one. Now, I had a colleague at work. They were cleaning out their books. We often have discussions about, he reads his stuff on the, I don't know what the device is, if it's a Kindle or a Nook or whatever. But we always have that discussion of book or the device, and he likes the device. But anyway, his wife was cleaning out some books because she's quite the reader also, and he handed me these books and said, hey, would you be interested in them? So wanted to share those with you. And the first one is The Warmth of Other Suns, The Epic Story of America's Great Migration by Isabel Wilkerson. And this was the winner of the National Book Critics Circle Award for Nonfiction. And so really look forward to this. This looks like it is going to be a really good book, and there's your author. So this book is from, went past it. This book is from Vintage Books out of New York, and it is a 2010 book. So, it's dated a little bit, but to me, it's still pretty new. It says on the back cover here, let's see, in this epic, beautifully written masterwork, Pulitzer Prize winning author Isabel Wilkerson chronicles one of the great untold stories of American history, the decades-long migration of black citizens who fled the South for northern and western cities in search of a better life. From 1915 to 1970, this exodus of almost 6 million people changed the face of America. She interviewed more than 1,000 individuals and gained access to new data and official records to write this definitive and vividly dramatic account of how these American journeys unfolded, altering our cities and our country and ourselves. So yeah, I look forward to that, because I remember when I used to teach recent American history, I definitely talked about that migration, but I never read a book solely on it. So I look forward to that. And then the other book that he handed to me was The Only Plane in the Sky: An Oral History of 9/11 by Garrett M. Graff. And I was not familiar with this book. This is a new title for me. I don't have a ton of stuff on 9/11 just because it's still a pretty recent event, although it's 20 years ago. So it is starting to get to the time period where I need to pick up maybe a couple volumes on it. But anyway, this is, let's see, it is from Avid Reader Press out of New York, and it is a 2019 book. So it's a fairly new book. It's got a lot of good blurbs on the back. Got Kirkus reviews, got John Meacham, you got Michael Beschloss. So, I mean, it's got some big names on the back of it. Let me read the inside cover to you, and then we'll wrap this video up. So, it says, the first comprehensive oral history of September 11th, 2001, 20 years ago. A panoramic narrative woven from the voices of Americans on the front lines of an unprecedented national trauma. Over the past 18 years, the monumental literature has been published about 9/11, from Lawrence Wright's The Looming Tower, which traced the birth and rise of Al-Qaeda, to the 9/11 Commission Report, the government's definitive factual retrospective of the attacks. But one perspective has been missing up to this point: a 360-degree account of the day told through the voices of the people who experienced it. Now, in The Only Plane in the Sky, award-winning journalist and best-selling historian Garrett Graff tells the story of the day as it was lived, in the words of those who lived it, drawing on never-before-published transcripts, recently declassified documents, original interviews, oral histories from nearly 500 government officials, first responders, witnesses, survivors, friends, and family members. Graff paints the most vivid and human portrait of September 11th attacks yet. It begins in the pre-dawn hours of airports in the Northeast, where we met the ticket agents who unknowingly usher terrorists onto their flights, and then the flight attendants inside the hijacked planes themselves. In New York City, first responders confront a scene of unimaginable horror at the Twin Towers. From a secret bunker underneath the White House, Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice watch for incoming planes on radar, and in the offices of the Pentagon, top officials feel the violent tremor as their headquarters comes under attack. Aboard the small number of unarmed fighter jets in the air, pilots make a pact to fly into a hijacked airliner if necessary to stop it from reaching its target. In the skies above Pennsylvania, civilians aboard the United Flight 93 make the ultimate sacrifice in their place. Then, as the day moves forward and flights are grounded across the country, Air Force One circles the nation alone, its passengers isolated and afraid. More than simply a collection of eyewitness testimonies, The Only Plane in the Sky is the historic narrative of how ordinary people grappled with extraordinary events in real time. The father and son working on separate floors in the North Tower, caught on different ends of the impact zone. The firefighter who rushes to the scene to search for his wife who works at the World Trade Center. The operator of in-flight telephone calls who keeps her promise to share a passenger's last words with his family. The beloved FDNY chaplain who stays on the scene to perform last rites for the dying, losing his own life when the towers collapse. The newly widowed young father who picks his infant daughter up from daycare for the first time as a single dad. The teachers who hold their fear at bay while evacuating terrified children from schools mere blocks from the World Trade Center. The generals at the Pentagon who break down and weep when they are barred from rushing into the burning building to try to rescue their colleagues, and students of all ages who struggle to process the morning's events, from those who grimace through the school picture day to those who are following the news on college campuses far from home. At once, a powerful tribute to the courage of everyday Americans and an essential addition to the literature of 9/11, The Only Plane in the Sky weaves together the unforgettable personal experiences of the men and women who found themselves caught at the center of an unprecedented human drama. The result is a unique, profound, and searing exploration of humanity on a day that changed the course of history and all of our lives. So anyway, I think that'll be pretty interesting to read. I was one of those kids on the college campus watching it on the TV. I was, just to let you know where I was sitting in the Student Union building at Northwest Missouri State, and we were waiting for classes, and we were sitting on some sofas out in the commons area, and there was a little coffee shop, deli, not deli, bakery thing where people could buy stuff, and they had a TV up there, and it was on the TV, and I didn't believe it at first. I mean, it was definitely shocking, to say the least, and I don't believe I ended up going to class. I'm pretty sure they canceled them, and then I worked at the rec center at Northwest, and went into the rec center, and we didn't have very many customers that day, and we had the TV turned on, and I sat there and watched Peter Jennings do his broadcast the entire time. And the day had a big impact on American history, that's for sure. And, students today, I sometimes take for granted because, my kids today, they're 12 years old, 13 years old. They weren't living yet. And so I got to go back and, like this year, we watched live footage from the news stations. I put on a YouTube video from the news stations up on there, and we were talking about why do we need to remember 9/11, and so I was showing that footage, and the room was silent. I don't know if the kids had seen all of that. I'm pretty sure they had not, and it was definitely moving for them. They were surprised at all of the stuff that happened that day. And I didn't even get to show. I ran out of time. I didn't even get to show everything. And so, I mean, I know it had an impact on them just watching that. So it's definitely something that we don't want to forget. So anyway, look forward to that. That'll give me a little bit more insider information on what was going on. So anyway, this is that's going to be my weekly read for this week. I hope everyone's having a great day out there, and hope you're getting a lot of reading done. I know I've had some pretty productive reading these last couple weeks and been very happy. I haven't had a ton of books finished, but that's because the books I'm reading are pretty thick. And so I've been doing some, juggling with that and schoolwork, and just trying to be a dad here at home, of course. Don't want to ignore my daughter. So, anyway, BookTube, just wanted to kind of give you an update. Hope everyone's doing well, and stay warm, stay safe, and until next time, happy reading.